Recording in progress.
That's right. Our TV's all cranked up, so it's way more fun that way. All right, so my name is Justin Azevedo. It's really nice to be here today and to hopefully meet all of you guys one-on-one by the time we get to the end of the day. I'm gonna be like wandering around aimlessly, and hopefully they can see me in front of the camera every once in a while. For the people that are online, it's good to see you. Hopefully you can hear me. If not, just give us a chat and we'll fix it. So before we go all the way into this, a little bit of background on myself. So I am a graduate of ASU. Oh no, it's terrible, right? It's okay. Please forgive me for it. I love doing this. I love teaching. So I've also been teaching at ASU now for about the past 6 years. So I teach mostly studio classes. I teach construction courses, some research classes as well, and theorem classes. But the other half of my life is spent also running and operating a studio. So I get to kind of do a little bit of all sides of kind of what we're talking about today. So part of my curriculum, most of my classes is preparing portfolios. I've done these talks on how to craft portfolios at ASU for a number of years, as well as a couple of universities. And I'm happy to be here today to talk to you guys about it and hopefully answer some questions. And portfolios are changing quite a bit, so it's kind of been fun to see how they've changed really over the last 10 years. So that's a little bit about me. My firm's called the Design Lab. We're not very big, we're only about 6 people. So it's kind of fun. We're small. Everybody kind of teaches or they interact still at the university level or at community colleges. So like our big thing is always community involvement, making sure we're staying involved and making sure we're crafting the landscape architects of the future we want. So this is kind of all about that as well, right? Trying to show what kind of a landscape architect you can be. So the title of my wonderful presentation today is how to craft a portfolio that people actually look at. For years, I've been sent portfolios that I never got past the first page. So it's really important to make sure, especially once we get into hiring season, that you make something that somebody actually wants to open that front page, right? That's the biggest step to get in the door, is somebody opening the first page. So, well, of course, I clicked on something else. So my little advancer isn't working. But there's one term to live by. Please take it with an open heart, but it's KISS, right? Keep it simple, stupid. Great advice hurts my feelings every time, right? It's okay to have super complicated projects, but just know the people that are going to be looking at these projects, they want to see how complicated they are without having to read your entire thesis at the end of your graduation, right? So a quick brief outline of the different things we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about the content. We're going to talk about digital versus hard copy, which is a big conversation today. Know your audience, what the packaging should look like, right? The idea of less is more, grammar versus spelling, on top of everything else we're putting on top of this, the range of skills, and then finally, we'll just talk about like a general order of how to craft a portfolio that's really simple, kind of follows the general outlines that most people do, and hopefully something that'll get somebody to open that first page of your portfolio, right? And I'll go kind of back and forth in this idea of talking about pages as well, because pages don't really exist in our digital realm sometimes. So the content's the really important one, right? So this is always the first thing I say is the number one no-no when it comes to crafting portfolio. Nobody ever says you have to go in a chronological order. You do not need to go your very first project you ever did, your second project you did, the third project, the fourth project. As a matter of fact, I recommend you probably get rid of that first project you ever did. I probably recommend you get rid of that second project you ever did. You might only be showing the final project you ever did sometimes in your portfolios, and that's okay. It's a great place to start. You have to start somewhere, right? Because let's be honest, sometimes the first work we ever did was not that great. This is from like my first semester back in like 2000, or second semester in like 2010, right? So this work is not work I'd necessarily be showing, but I'd be showing something like this, right? I want to show the best work that I was completing by the time I ended in a program, right? Or it doesn't matter if you're necessarily doing all this work in the program. If anybody has internships yet, right? If you're doing work for exterior firms, all you gotta do is ask if it's okay if you put it in your portfolio and slap it in there, right? It's okay to build on this work as much as possible, but show your best work only. That is my biggest piece of advice for portfolio. Get rid of everything that doesn't look good, that doesn't sound good, that doesn't work correctly. only show the stuff that looks good. That's what I want to see when I'm hiring somebody. I don't necessarily want to see the stuff where it's like, huh, I want to see a little bit of growth, but I don't necessarily want to see just like, oh, I never quite finished that piece of the project, right? Everybody has that every semester. I've been teaching for a long time. I did it just like you guys. There's always the pieces of the projects that never get quite finished correctly. I won't ever know that existed if you don't show me in that portfolio, right? Digital versus hard copy is like one of the biggest questions we get today. I'm so torn on what on earth digital versus hard copy really is going to do in the next couple of years, but we'll try to dive into as much as possible, because is one really better than the other? Anybody have any ideas like why like one might be better than the other one? Do you have any opinions?
Is it like the color? I feel like color is really different when you print it versus digital.
Exactly. That's one of my biggest ones. And then the worst part about digital at the same time is my computer screen looks different than yours, and it looks different than the monitor we're using up here versus over here, right? They have slightly different color schemes, different contrast and ratios. So digital is not consistent. Hard copy is whatever you've created. You printed it, you checked it, you know it's consistent, right? But the challenge with hard copy, you have to get a hard copy in front of somebody, which is getting harder and harder to do these days. There's less and less mail. It's just expensive to send stuff. Who knows if it's going to get there or not sometimes. But really, it's all about knowing your audience. I'm going to talk about this idea over and over again about knowing who you're trying to send these to. Because if you're going after the small mom and pop shop with maybe 2 founders that have been there, they've been running the business for 15, 20 years, they might still be in love with hard copies. They like it when you walk in the front door and you set down this hard copy in front of them, and they like that, right? They still might want to see a digital copy sent to the mail, but they might really like and appreciate having that hard copy, especially for an interview. Versus pretty much every large major firm is requiring a digital version of it, right? Which might be a PDF. I'm just going to keep going, so I'll just keep talking about it forever. But it's different, right? So we'll get into it more. It's a confusing and deep subject. So digital portfolios, they come in many shapes and forms. My favorite version of portfolios that are done digitally right now is that Adobe Portfolio was released as part of the standard package for the Adobe Creative Suite, which everybody has at this point probably right now, right? So you have access to it, free website, great templates, really easy to set up and lay out and show the projects you want to give your narrative. And I like to say it's free. You're already paying for it, right? Or the school is paying for it. Somebody is already footing the bill for it. So let's go ahead and use it to our advantage. There's a bunch of other websites we'll talk about too. But it's really fun because it allows room for exploration, right? So this was that first portfolio on the left on the previous screen. So this is just the very first project you click on. It allows him to uniquely and easily organize it. The description stays at the top, stays stable and consistent, but you can move through the imagery and you can set it up how you want to, right? It also allows a bit more room for play and change. You could go on a whim, you could say, like, you know, I'm going to add this in there. And you don't have to worry about the fact that you already sent out the link yesterday, because that link updates automatically, right? Versus when we're sending out a hard copy, if we decide to change something if you sent the hard copy, it's going to be really confusing if you send a second one, right? Or if you show up and like, hey, I actually changed something, unless you're already in conversations, and it's okay. But I love the play. And you'll see in this, like, the thing that I really like about the play is it allows for a little bit more of the exploration of like who you are, the descriptor of you. A really big part of a lot of firms is the culture of the firm, right? And especially in smaller like firms and how they operate, all the way up to medium and large, depending on how they're kind of running their business and their day-to-day teams. Every portfolio I look at, I think I've hired pretty much everybody that I've hired has had like this kind of play section. They've had like something about like their travel, they like to do photography, they're a ceramicist, they love hiking, right? These are all things that it's pretty universally loved in our office. So if I see something, it's like, oh, you know what, we have related interest already. It opens the door that little bit more, right? I will talk about where this kind of stuff goes towards the end though. But where to start, right? The Adobe Portfolio, as I was talking about, one of my favorites. Squarespace is a great, cheaper option if you stick with some of the cheaper layouts, right? It costs a little bit of money, but if you only need to have one for 6 months to a year, it's not a big deal, especially if it's what's gonna get you in the door and into a job, right? It's a really, really worthy investment. But there's other ones like Journal Portfolio, WordPress, Wix has great free stuff as well. And again, I think this is all being recorded, and I'm going to give you guys a digital copy too. That way you can go back and look at all this, right? I hate lectures where like, no, this is all mine. You have to write this all down as we're doing it. It's not very fun that way. It makes it for a much more boring experience. But digital, right? Super fun. I love it. The other part of digital portfolios talk about towards the end is the PDF version of the hard copy, right? That is what most of the world is operating off of right now when we talk about digital. I think websites are going to be the next really big thing. Anybody that's kind of worth their salt right now that's going after any like really large firms, they've probably crafted a website portfolio at this point. Any questions like what that digital portion is? Yeah. That's okay. It's all about talking. Uh-huh. Okay, so the question was on this one is, I lost, oh, we're good. Internet's still there. So the question was, for those that are online, I'm gonna repeat it, that if I have this online digital website portfolio, most firms are still asking for a PDF portfolio right now, right? I think that's the thing that's about to switch over. And it was a heavy topic of discussion again at the ASLA National Conference back in November in Nashville. It was something a lot of us were talking about, like how is that going to change and how is it going to rearrange and how are we going to recraft the way we try to put out our postings, because it's getting older. It is more convenient for us to put a PDF into a folder, but I think it's going to change. But unfortunately, that's why hard copies are still really important. And the hard copy is both that PDF and printed version, right? Normally I say, and it's going to be at the end of the presentation as well, that I highly recommend starting with the hard copy version.
Justin, I have a question. With the digital copies as well, I noticed that there's always a CAPLA for
Yes.
size.
Uh-huh.
Have you, in your experience, had issues when you make a website, try to convert it to PDF? Do you have size issues? Because I feel like when you do digital, like it's like you're not
keeping track of it. Right. So just to repeat the question again for those that didn't hear it. When you go to export an online portfolio that's done on a website, right? Like, is it going to be too big? How do you work within the constraints of the 5 megabytes that typically is that max size, or the 25, whatever it might be? My recommendation is don't ever export that digital portfolio. It's normally, I would say right now, the website version of the portfolio, it's used much more in conversational. So it's more of a networking tool than it is necessarily that final piece of the job. But again, I think that's the thing that's really about to shift, as the amount of portfolios on just like Adobe portfolio have exploded. It's gone crazy in the last couple of years. And there's a couple other different ways as well, like Issue, which we'll talk about that towards the end as well. Issue is a way to upload your PDF version of your hard copy. And that's beginning to become much more widely acceptable, because who wants to really make you stay down at that 5 megabyte size for a file, right? If I'm doing a really nice, big, pretty document, I know I'm probably going to have at least 50 megabytes, right? If I have really high quality images, and let's say the document's over 30 pages long, you're likely to have something that's a little bit higher. But you know what? If they are forcing you and requiring you to stay that small amount, it's fine. That's what smallpdf.com is for, right? It'll solve all your issues, and just upload it on there, and it'll shrink it right down for you, and it'll probably take out a bunch of stuff that didn't need to be on there. Because a lot of the stuff we export from like InDesign on hard copy stuff, it is all like 100% based on the amount of layering that's in there, is really what fills up a lot of the size. So you can do compress on like Adobe Acrobat Pro, right? Everybody use that at this point probably. But small PDF actually does it a little bit better. But it's going to detract some of the quality. But you know what? If we have to get down to 5 megabytes, we're going to have to get down to 5 megabytes, right? Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Again, if you have any questions, just throw your hand up. Like it's supposed to be conversational, because this is a weird new thing for most of you probably, right? Or you've maybe done one and it's time to update it. But I'm guessing because we have our thing next week that it is probably about to get started tonight or got started yesterday, right? So I think hard copies will always have a place in this world. everybody likes copy books or coffee table books is kind of the way I refer to them. I still have kept probably every hard copy portfolio I've ever received from an applicant. I love them. I love going back to them. It's kind of fun to go back through and look. I might pull one of those suckers out 3 years later because it's a lot easier to find one of those than it is to find a PDF that's been buried in my hard drive somewhere. So I think there's a reason why we'll always have hard copy portfolios. But again, I think there's going to be this shift on what they're accepting here pretty quickly for most firms. So this is what I've been talking about, the idea that the hard copy is rarely hard copy, because normally you upload it online somewhere, or it's now a PDF you've sent in an email. The hard copy is really reserved for walking into an interview, if we ever have in-person interviews again. I'm kind of hoping we get to do a little bit more of those, but like we've been doing, like we did some last year, we did them outside at a park, which that was kind of fun. But that was the way we did some in-person, because it's all about finding that culture for us in our office, right? But it's rarely going to be hard copy. So it's always probably gonna be a digital format as well, right? So it's just a term to kind of help guide that idea of the PDF hard copy versus the online portfolio, which is really a self-made website. Yeah. Ooh, that's always here. So the question was, are you expected to leave your hard copy portfolio when you go in for an interview? Okay, I'm just getting rings in here. I would say, like, my personal favorite is when people leave it. I understand they can get pretty expensive. My piece of advice is always keep it as economical as possible to reproduce while still making it look and feel good. Because I think it is better to leave them behind, especially if you have the opportunity to. Some people will just hand it back. I interviewed at a number of places way back in the day that they would just like, they'd say, oh, nope, here, you can take it home with you. And like, I felt like that was rejection to me. So I think the people that keep it, there's probably a reason why they're keeping it. So I would not say I want it back. I would try to let them make the decision for you. Does that make sense? That's a good question though. It's not one I've ever really thought about, besides the fact I love hard copy portfolios. Because again, coffee table books, yes. Ooh. Really hard copies now at this point, it's really reserved for interviews, like actually showing up with a booklet in your hands. However, I don't know. Really, the hard copy is meant for like local, like I would be happy to like send out a portfolio to somebody I knew that was like local in the area if I didn't want to go drive in and dump on them like a portfolio and just say, or like they're never in their office and you know that because everybody's been working remotely for 2.5 years now or 2 years. But really, mail is a great way for them to get lost. It will likely get shuffled in with like the material samples unless they ask for your portfolio to be mailed to them in a hard copy format. Yes. I would assume most people would expect something like that, or I've had lots of people that come in and they have their iPad with them. I'm perfectly okay with this as long as it's a big enough iPad and it's really easy to sit on the table. Now, if you know you're going to be there with like 6 people, don't do the iPad thing. It's pretty rare you're going to have an interview with 6 people. It's normally going to be like me in my office because we like that and a few others in the area, right? Because everybody wants to meet everybody and it's like it's exciting. Somebody new is in the office for the day. But I would say digital is still more fun because you can leave it behind, but there's nothing wrong with this like giant 12-inch iPad and just kind of like, and here it is. And you can kind of swipe through it and you can hand it to them, right? And they can hand it back. Yeah, that's what Lysol wipes are for these days. They've become a part of like all of our arsenals. So I wouldn't worry too much about it, but yeah, you can do it digital as well. Question.
One more question as far as the hard copy versus digital formatting. So some of these like internships for example, they're like, hey, we want no more than 10 pages.
Yep.
Obviously you have a file size. If you are going to go to the trouble to create a hard copy, does it necessarily need to exactly match the digital one? Or if you have more work that you feel like you could showcase on the hard copy, add it to that if there are constraints with the file size and page number digital?
So that's like exactly what the next topic is on. So it's a really good introduction. So the question is, what do you do when there are restrictions on page limits, right? And how do you start to construct that? And do you print it? And how do you deal with all that? I would never print one that has like a page limit on it, unless you know you're going in for an interview, right? That's the only time I print my downsized portfolio, unless it is your permanent portfolio. If your portfolio already matches everything they want, it's 10 pages, the 5 megabytes doesn't matter when you're printing it, right? It's like, if that's your total portfolio on an average day, that's fine. Print it, carry it in. I think that's awesome. But I would not spend the extra money doing the extra printing unless you have to, right? Until you have an in-person interview necessarily. Does that answer the question?
It does.
Kind of.
If you do have an in-person interview,
Yeah.
you wanted to show more work, like put your best foot forward, is there any harm in?
There is no harm in it.
showing more?
Okay, so that's a great question. So you've already made it past the first step. Basically, it's this idea of when you're dealing with portfolio, they had a limit on the page numbers. Again, so just repeating everything for everybody online. So if there is a limit on page numbers for the initial submittal, I think it's out the door by the time you get into a sit down and like, I'm now sitting across from you. If you hand me something that's now 25 pages long, I'm not gonna be like, oh, I might make like a snarky comment being like, oh, this is much longer than 10 pages, but I like the work, right? That's normally what's gonna be the conversation. So I would not worry too much about that being the issue. And that comes down to like, know your audiences. Y'all likely will not probably stay all here in Tucson or even in Arizona, right? So it's really important to know like who you're going to go work for. So like my favorite example of the portfolio I get like every year is somebody from like Chicago or Michigan, and everything that they're trying to sell me on is something that has absolutely nothing to do with how we live here in the Southwest. And the style doesn't necessarily match mine. And it just doesn't flow quite right. Just because you learned here in the desert though, does not mean that you are not capable of getting a job in New York or Chicago or Michigan, right? Or vice versa. It's all about how you frame the work you've done and how you show that work that you're doing, right? And like, this is literally a photo that somebody put on the cover of one who actually, where did they go? It might have been an ASU student, and they sent me this, and I was like, what does this have to do with like where I'm at or where you're at currently or what your education is, right? So it didn't feel right to me. And it's like, that's why I always put up this one. It's like, this feels like home, right? The desert feels like home to me. I want something that relates to me. That's all I'm trying to say is you can craft a portfolio and make small edits for every single firm you send it to, or you can have something that's pretty broad and sent out everywhere if you're really careful about it, right? But there's nothing wrong with like very much, oh, my brain just stopped. Really making sure and fine tuning that that portfolio is actually meant for the firm you're sending it to. If they're a planning firm, most of your projects should probably be planning based, right? And then you might have a little bit more on the detail side towards the end, and vice versa. If they're a high design firm and not much in the planning, keep the planning projects in the back or off and your high design stuff in the front. And right now is the best time to start to acknowledge this because you want to know what their work is too, right? If you have firms out there that you love and adore and you think you might want to work with someday, start following their styles. This is Milk. All their stuff are always these crazy colors. So you don't have to match this as you guys start to work on future projects, but it's not a bad idea to start like pulling color schemes and things like that. You can tailor yourself to fit with a firm years in advance before you ever go work for them. I know people that have been crazy enough to go through and like they redo like whole projects just to match the firm that they're applying for, right? Takes a lot of time. I think it's probably more effort than it's worth more often than not, but you can do it in school and try to emulate what they're doing already, right? I'm sorry, I'm talking like way longer than I was planning on, but I love this topic. Versus like this, right? Like Christy tonight is very much in the high design versus much more on the planning side. So knowing kind of these finer textures and these outline details and like how it all starts to come together. And then it's important to know the firm. So this is what's now I'd say like a small medium firm in Phoenix. This is Trueform. So these are the founders here. They are a small mom and pop shop, right? So it's really important to recognize like the kind of work they do and be a little bit more personable probably with these smaller firms. You want to be that person that they feel like they can talk to, right? And you want to do the same thing in your portfolios and your resumes. It can be a little bit more conversational, a little bit more fun. You might include a little bit more of those extracurricular activities you do versus, I think it's a PWP or something like that out in San Francisco, right? it's important to know that like these guys have a whole internship program that's like, it's like school. It's a semester of school you go into. And what they're looking for is the best of the best of the best of the best in like basically rendering at the end of the day, and some design style that goes with it is obviously needed. But know how to craft your portfolio to fit one versus the other as well. That's the exact same idea as like knowing like planning versus design, and what kind of stuff they're looking for. Anybody have any questions on that before I move forward? It's kind of a weird topic, but I want to make sure I talk about it. Know your audience. Anybody? We're good? Okay, let's keep going. So the packaging. So to me, this is more about layout at the end of the day. Super simple rules that I love to live by. Basically, the rule of thirds on a page. You can get this set up really nice and easy in an InDesign document. And it's really easy to follow, and everything kind of matches up, but you don't have to follow it always. You can kind of break it on occasion. Hierarchy, 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 hierarchy. Remember this page because we're going to come back to it later. But have a hierarchy that's set up in your typefaces, right? To where everything actually feels like it's a title, or it's in paragraph form, or it's a label, and it should be consistent probably throughout the entire document by the time you're done. It's this idea of, again, keeping it simple. It doesn't have to have all the original labels from that first project. Build a hierarchy, stick to it. Clean and consistent layouts. This is the idea of the rule of thirds, right? But not everything is always going to line up perfectly on that rule of thirds. They kind of broke this up and they keep breaking it up, but the layout is consistent, right? There's this grid format that's easy to follow, colors are the same, hierarchy matches. Don't be afraid to go online and see what you can find for portfolio examples. Try to copy it. Try your hardest to copy exactly what your favorite portfolio is that's out there, because you'll never be able to do it. And that's fine, because you probably have your own design style and you'll be going through it. You're not gonna be able to copy it because you're like, I really like this font instead of this font. Or I wanna kind of change the layout. I want bigger margins. I want different colors, right? You're never gonna be able to perfectly match it because your inner designer is probably gonna change it too much. But changing it too much is a good thing. Makes it your own, right? I think the biggest form of flattery is emulation, right? And it's not just like copying, because you probably won't be able to do it. The packaging, again, this has gotten a little bit more different as years have gone on, but like I love like kind of creative, fun packaging on that side. This gets expensive. Don't always do this, but like if you want to keep one for yourself, like it's kind of fun to keep your work when you're done with school. And if you have one, this would be like when I'd say like you don't necessarily give away when you go into an interview unless you're able to do it fairly cheaply and efficiently. Because it's kind of fun later on. Portfolios is also, it's just this beautiful thing you have at the end of school typically, where you can take it home and it's something that you can go back to 15, 20 years later and be like, look at what I've done, look at how far I've come, look at what I used to do. It's really fun. So having nice, clean packaging is just as important. This is back from when like we did all these on like laser cutters and fun stuff like that. Now there's like, you could go send out your portfolio and have it printed basically like a magazine or book format, and it's like $15 to like $35, and that's pretty cheap. Like it's sent in like 3 weeks, especially for companies out there that do it. So there's all kinds of fun ways to package it if you want to. Most of the time though, you're not going to have 3 to 4 weeks to wait for a special version like this to come in the mail or to build it every time. So my recommendation is stick with kind of the simple. I love like glue binding, which you can even go to like Office Max that has a print center. I don't know if you guys have one close by. They do it. It's actually cheaper than doing spiral binding. It looks a little bit more clean. And it kind of makes it feel more like a magazine, which I like that. So you can have like cardstock pages, you can have gloss pages, but instead of spiral bound, it's a nice clean glue binding on the side. Let's see, we can see on this one correctly. There we go. So most importantly on layout, big pictures, little text. You can't really see it in that one. You can see it over here on this screen. Do not fill these pages with text. It's really boring. I hate reading text until I get really excited about a project and I go back and read it. Keep it simple. I'm gonna be like way into like looking at this rendering because I'm like, that is super cool. Like look at like the color, like look at, we got a little path that's kind of going around there. We have like a more stabilized path in the playground. And like I can start to see like how you can live in the space. And then I'm getting excited about it. And I'm like, okay, so what is this? Then I'll go back and I'll read the text, but I don't want pages of text. Because less is always more. You don't have to fill a page to make something look clean and beautiful. White space speaks volumes. This is how you call attention to things and how you call attention to your detail of what you've created. Don't smash it all together. White space is your best friend. Grammar and spelling, right? Always the most important thing. Does anyone remember that hierarchy slide? Hierarchy was spelled wrong like 10 times on there. So it's really important to go back and check your work and have somebody like really read through it. And oftentimes you won't catch it when giving a quick presentation like this, but like I have one person in my office, that's the first thing they do. And every time they get anything, doesn't matter if it's something we're doing professionally or if it's a portfolio that's getting sent in or they come in for a desk crit review or a final review, their first thing is like, they sit down, they finish giving a review. It's like, all right, Spencer, you're up. He goes like, you have like 16 spelling errors in there, right? And they're like, son of a gun, because now he's completely ignored your design because he sees spelling errors. That's just the way his brain works. And the way a lot of people's brain works. So try to fix it. And like, there's always the person sitting next to you or somebody that's probably willing to go through it. Don't ever send it to me and expect grammar and spelling to be perfect because that's not my forte. Find the people that are pretty good at it. My wife is wonderful at it. So she's helped me with it for years, all the way through school, professionally. She still reads through like my final documents I send off to like cities that are like hundreds of pages long. She's like, oh my God, she just had to do another one in December. And she's like, how long is this one? I was like, it's like 750 pages. And she wanted to kill me, but she still did it. She's awesome, right? And it's like, you need people like that to help you with some of your grammar and spelling because we're designers. That's not necessarily what we do, but there might be some of you that is what you do, right? So find those people. I talked that one too long. Anyway, skills. Hand drawings never go out of style. Super cool. Everybody loves to see you can still do hand drawings, right? It shows you can take control. I always say, like, if you can draw by hand or at least do a little quick sketch, you can control any meeting you're ever sitting in. You can be that person that's like quietly sitting off in the corner and it's just drawing away in this whole hour-and-a-half long meeting, right? And eventually what's going to happen is somebody's going to go, hey, what are you drawing over there, Chris? And like, and they're going to see, and then you get to share it with the team, right? Or whoever you might be with. Like, it's a great way as a junior designer, especially, to be able to have some of your ideas heard. Make sure you still have some of that hand drawing capability. But however, everybody's looking for digital these days, in one way, like shape, form, or another. Our office and a couple others here in like Arizona, there's still a lot that still like to play a lot with hand drawings and stuff like that and hand sketches. But I would say a lot of our final big project work for selling stuff, that's really what you have to do, designer. For a lot of design firms, you have to sell your final idea. This is the stuff that really helps to kick it off, right? But you have to start somewhere. You have to start with a design idea. And this is typically how we originally sell a client on everything we do, is through hand sketching in our meetings. And in the office, we still do all of our residential work in our office. The first like 3 iterations all have to be done by hand. That's our number one rule. Everything's in my hand until you get beyond that phase. And then you can go into construction documents and get really bored working on the computer forever and always. But it's really important to do both sides of it. Show your range of knowledge and skills, right? So it's really important to me to be able to know, like, okay, so even though I might be a mostly design firm, still do a lot of urban planning, right? So I want to see like this urban planning side of it. I want to see that they understand these low impact development techniques. And just basic water flows, because it's some of the basics of design that sometimes people completely miss, and it drives me nuts and wild. How you can completely miss this in school at some point and in your professional career. But so find a way to show that you do know that, because that's something everybody's looking for. Even construction documents are important. I cannot remember for the life of me what your curriculum's sitting at right now, but do you guys have construction classes, correct? Right? You probably produce at least one set of construction documents-ish before you graduate, right? Show people that. It's not the first thing you're going to put in any of these presentations because it's not that exciting, right? It's not that sexy. But at the end of like this portfolio, if I see something like this, that's just like, oh my God, there's line weights, there's hatching, there's like real call outs on that. I'm like, oh my God, they get it. And it's like, and that's a good thing, because even though none of us want to be CAD monkeys, it's still really important to be able to do CAD well, no matter where you're going. And you're probably going to do a decent amount of it to get started with at a school. You might not, but it's good to be prepared for it. The order. So what goes in a portfolio is always a big question, right? So my first thing is always put your best foot forward. That cover page is a really nice, simple way to show that you have a nice, simple design idea. And you can probably take one of your renderings or maybe your photographer or something, right? And use that as part of your opening that first page of the portfolio that we started talking about at the very beginning, right? I want somebody to be excited to open this thing. So show something that entices them, right? Don't be afraid to tell us a little bit about you. This is a past student. I stole hers from this last year, I think. So she focused mainly on doing like a full resume on hers, right? It doesn't always have to be a full resume because probably they're going to require that separately. So I think it's my next slide. It's okay to talk a little bit more informally about who you are, right? I'm a designer working in Phoenix, Arizona, with a background in visual arts, site planning, policy, and design research, right? I get that really fast. I'm interested in the dialogue between people and places, and he tells me where he grew up and kind of things he likes to do. I enjoy exploring, fishing, and reading. This is a past intern of mine, so I like picking on him and using them all the time. So I like both of these. I don't think there's anything wrong with one or the other. But again, it's about knowing your audience. And if you think they're going to be the people that want to see the resume, have a resume in there. But I don't think it's wrong to have something that's a little bit more of a personal bio as well, hidden in there somewhere. Table of contents, take it or leave it. I'm one of those people, I don't really care for if there's a table of contents, because I'm probably like ripping past that first page and looking for cool projects. And hopefully you have something that looks like a title page or that tells me that we're on to a new project using hierarchy. So you don't need to have a table of contents, but there's nothing wrong with having one. If you like having one, every document we produce in our office, we have one, even though I'm not sold on them all the time. So sometimes they get yanked out of there anyways. Show it. Remember, less is more. This is a decent amount of text here, but I'm not upset by it because it's not overwhelming the page. I don't feel like I have to read it because I'm immediately drawn into that kind of cool rendering. Maybe didn't show quite enough for what I would like to see in most. But then this is the next page, the next part of the project, right? So this project, I think in this portfolio went on for there was 10 pages on one project, which that's okay as long as it's not getting really boring by the end of it, right? As long as you're showing cool new things every single time. So again, it just keeps going. But remember, keep it simple. Like if I don't need to see 10 pages on one project, don't show me 10 pages on one project, unless that is the one project you have that shows me your full range of skills. Don't be afraid to show that other stuff, right? Again, this is like some of the personal stuff. This is one of my past employees, and they love to go hiking. So they had like 2 pages of this, but they just kind of crammed too much stuff in. I'm not a big fan of this layout, but it works. It still tells me the kind of stuff they like. They love doing photography. They did a bunch of extra InDesign classes and graphic design courses, digital photography, right? Hand drawing, love to see me some hand drawings. There's a little rendering up there from something that wasn't probably part of the projects that she showed. And this wonderfully crazy, fantastic Mr. Fox bust that she made in a ceramics class that she had been taking, right? And she'd been taking ceramics classes for years. So there's just a funny, fun one that she threw in on top of some of these cups and bowls and fun stuff she was making. Tips and tricks. Harry Potter's got us here. A little bit of magic to it, right? Find inspiration. Again, this is what I'm talking about. Don't be afraid to try to emulate. It's the greatest form of flattery. Start with the hard copy. Always start with the hard copy. I think it's the right way to go because everybody's still wanting those currently. But I think the best way to do it is to try to get towards having your own website that starts to represent you. Especially if any of you are all planning on going to the national conference next year, or you want to get out of town, you got to find some of these bigger networking events where it's really easy to have a bump it on your phone and tap somebody's phone when you're at an event and say, here, and you tap their phone and it automatically loads everything up. Super cool little thing you can have. And it will just upload your website and it'll probably have your contact information, all your cool projects, right? So it's a networking tool that works really well, especially if you want to go out and far. Keep it short at first, right? We were talking about this before we started today. Don't be embarrassed when we go to jump into these portfolios a little bit. I'm not worried about you having put one page together at this point, right? Or if you have nothing, you just want to talk about it. You don't need to have a full 30-page portfolio. It can be that 10-page portfolio. It might only be 5 pages right now. It's all about starting somewhere. Consistency and creativity are key. Making sure that you're showing your creative side, but you have to find a way to be consistent through it. This is my favorite part and always like drives everybody nuts. There's nothing wrong with going back and fixing your old projects. You know how at the end of every semester, it's like, well, if you would have had another week, you could have finished that out. Find that extra week somewhere, finish that project, do the things you wanted to do, or go back and make the corrections that in particular jurors wanted to see. My favorite thing that I've always heard, like an anecdote from students graduating from my classes, is that reviewer is often probably, or the person they're trying to get hired by is more often than not probably sitting in one of my like midterm reviews or desk crits or final reviews, and they might have told them to fix something, and then they get a portfolio that doesn't have that thing fixed, and they're like, right? That's like a big slap in the face to them. They're like, you could have just taken like the 5 extra minutes to probably a small fix and change, as long as they didn't say it changed the whole project. It's going to make them be like, oh, look, see, they listen to me. You automatically have this extra bit of connection. It's like those little things go a long ways. Know your goals. That's again going back to like know your audience, know who you want to work for, know what you want to do. I don't care what project you guys are working on. If you think you want to work on like more planning style of projects and urban design style projects, you can take any design project and do like extra analysis on it, right? And create these extra planning documents to go with it. And same with anything like a planning style project that y'all are working on. You can go the opposite way. You can do all the basics you have to do for all your planning stuff, right? But oftentimes it's those little pictures that sell the extra little pieces, right? They dive into the detail portions of it. So know what you want to do. I know it's a hard question when you're still in school on what exactly you want to do when you graduate, but really start exploring that. Find your goals and know what they are, and don't be afraid to explore a little bit and ask people about them. Never be afraid to reach back out, especially these days. We were talking about how busy like every landscape architecture firm is. Like it's not here locally. It is across the country and really across the world at the moment. And it's not just landscape architecture, it's engineering, it's traffic engineers, it's our electrical engineers, it's everybody we work with. It's like being driven up a wall with the amount of projects coming in the door. So it's really easy for any of us to lose an email that says like, hey, I'm applying to be your firm. I'm really interested to hear more. It's okay to follow up a few times. My advice is like, don't ever email more than probably once in a week, unless you're supposed to have a meeting with them, right? Don't be afraid to call the firm every once in a while. There's nothing wrong with that. A phone call tends to go a long ways. It's a lot harder to ignore a phone call that's coming in than it is an email. You're like, I'll come back to that later. If somebody's sitting on their phone, it's like, I can't, I'm in a meeting. That's okay. You can call back next week. If you really want to work for that firm, that's something you're really interested in, and you feel like you got a connection, don't be afraid to bug them a little bit until they say like, I'm sorry, we just can't, right? That's when you know it's time to walk away, and don't stalk them necessarily, but don't be afraid to push that boundary a little bit. Always leave a way to reach out to you. Infamous thing in almost every portfolio and resume that comes in for the first time, it probably doesn't have your email address or phone number on it. Don't give me your home address. I've seen that one too many times. I'm just like, why do I care where they live right now? Especially if they live in Chicago. They probably shouldn't tell me they're out of state at the moment. Not that it matters, but it's like, it's one of those things like, yeah, maybe it might like change how I think of like what's going on. You want to get rid of all those cultural biases as much as possible. Especially for some firms that might be a little stodgy. So we want to try to avoid that as much as possible, but always remember email, phone number, because some people like one versus the other. And really, it's just always got to remember that one term to live by. You got to keep it simple, stupid, as much as it might hurt your feelings. So that's the end of the presentation. I know I went longer. I apologize. I added like 20 new slides last night because I was like, I feel like I need to change things to talk more about this digital. But anyways, anybody have any questions? I know it was a lot to digest. Yeah. So I go back and forth. I think portfolio is already you anyways. Portfolios, I'm much more apt to have a photo of yourself in there, because more often than not, you've probably reached a certain point if they're going to open the portfolio. They're probably already looking for somebody. They probably saw you have the skills in your resume already, because that's something my first go through. And it's a lot of firms' first go through is like, did they at least check the boxes of that 1 to 3 years experience? Oh, by the way, 1 year of experience, that's graduating. Okay, as far as I'm concerned, and anybody else is at this point, it's like if you're graduating, you got 1 year. Okay, we're just gonna give it to you. And it's been that way for 15 years. 20 years now. They probably started using the wrong term there. It's like that 1 year of experience, you just graduated, you're perfect for the position, apply for it. But really, yeah, go back to the question. Sorry, I forgot we have people online. That the idea of like showing a photo because it creates biases, it's the same idea as the addresses, right? But again, I think that portfolio is such a personal thing already. It's okay to show who you are. If you're not comfortable with it, or you feel like it's not the right choice for the firm you're going after, again, know your audience, yank it out. If you know you're applying for a firm with a bunch of stodgy old white men, maybe we just leave all photos out because we don't want to like bring up any cultural biases, right? But if it's a firm that's probably trying to change things a little bit and have some fun with things, younger firms in particular, like Dick Studio is a great example that I absolutely love and adore, right? They're trying to push those boundaries and like create a new kind of studio that's still this larger studio because they have multiple branches, they're getting it to a certain size, but they're very much trying to be accepting and loving of everybody and create this new kind of office that's not just the same of 10 times over. So it's important to try to find that and understand that. Again, know your audience. That's my biggest piece of advice. Questions?
We've got one, this is more, I guess, kind of tailored towards a lot of us that are going to be submitting portfolios for summer internships.
Mhm.
Like this second year, recruit myself. So, and I know there'll be differences in what we're submitting versus like an actual professional portfolio we're trying to get a job. With that, we're limited on the amount of work that we have. It's probably, we consider the quality of work that needs to be shown. And then, with these internships, going back to your formatting slide. So do you think it's better? So, most of these, there are 24 by 36 storyboards and they're already, kind of like that reverse rule and
Yep.
formatted. We need to deconstruct that and break that down, or just put that in its entirety and maybe a text box to kind of explain the project kind of parameters, or what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so the question really is, when you're creating a portfolio, can you reuse the stuff you've been doing in 24 by 36s in these large format styles, right? My piece of advice is throw out the board you started with, unless you really like the style of it. Keep the style of it, make it for the 8.5 by 11. Anybody will be able to see that you've taken a larger board and downsized it really quickly, because probably going to lose some of its value in certain things, because you probably have things that get too small. You probably have things that still feel way too big because you have things too small. Because like a 24 by 36 board, depends on what you have on it and how much stuff you put on there, but like you might have 3 or 4 different graphics on it. 3 or 4 different graphics might be enough to fill 2 or 3 pages on an 8.5 by 11, right? So I recommend using that to your advantage, especially when you only have so much work, right? I'm not sure what year y'all are, but like you might only have one project you're proud of. That's okay, especially going after internships. That's kind of what everybody's used to. Especially when you're looking at internships, maybe 2 or 3 projects max, but oftentimes there's like one really good project and then somebody might have like tagged on portions of a second project that had some good pieces to it. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Leave out all the stuff that's bad unless you think there's something of value to it for the audience you're trying to speak to. Good question.
And then just to piggyback on that, as far as obviously we want to maximize like our graphics and the visual piece of that. But for that balance with text and like giving some context for the project itself, like what does that balance look like?
So my piece of advice on the question is like when we're creating the text portion of the document, basically, right? How much text is too much text? How much text is too little text? Let's say hi to people on the camera. It's really, I don't know. It's like you saw the example on this one, right? This is probably the most text I'd ever recommend on a page. They dedicated, this is a spread, right? So this is an 8.5 by 11 on this side, 8.5 by 11 on that side. This is from the Harvard GSD, right? So it's, they like to change things up a little bit and try to be a little bit more posh than a lot of others. I wouldn't dedicate an entire page of text unless it felt really right with your layout. If you're really good with magazine layouts, this is the way to do it, right? But more often than that, I keep it to like a paragraph, 2 paragraphs max. This is pretty big typeface. When we're looking at 8.5 by 11, that is probably like 18, right? Or larger. Most of your typeface is probably going to be like 10-point font if you're giving like a full description, unless you're trying to bold out like a big mission statement that's super exciting, right? Like green living in the future in the Southwest, all those like hot green words is what we call them, right? Like that might be something that gets a little bit bigger in text wise, but again, that's creating a hierarchy of something. If you're just doing your paragraph form text, keep it small, paragraph or 2, keep it simple, because you will likely be able to explain that project at some point. There's no need to write a full essay on what you've done, because you're probably going to hopefully talk to them about it at some point. Your question?
Yeah. You mentioned about we can have a construction graphic, but we are as our landscape architecture students, we have a very huge chance to produce such kind of engineering style. So it's a well HR persons who think we're not professional at that.
So the question is basically, you guys haven't done construction documents yet, right? Which is, what's it? Two by the time you graduate, which is, that's fine. That's about normal. I don't know of any university that's really pushing construction documents, but beyond like one or two kind of styles through your entire program. Doesn't matter if it's undergrad, master's, doctorate probably doesn't touch it. But that's okay. Really, we're trying to see like portions of it. So like, let's say, do you all have a details class that focuses on construction details? Kind of, sort of, or you have like a time frame for it? It's okay to not show a full construction document set. Like we were looking at, let's just go back to it. Sorry, the clicker's a slow way to do this. Oh, there we go. There we go. Okay, so, right, like this is not technically a full construction document set. This is just one page. Actually, this is one portion. This is a half a page from a construction document set. I don't expect you to show me like a giant, massive thing. Let's say you showed me one detail. Let's say you showed me that you created a detail of a bridge or a really nice swale. As long as that construction detail looks good, I don't care. I just want to know that you have the ability to do some AutoCAD. Because even in the offices that do pretty much everything by hand, or you're doing it in one way, shape, form, or another, everybody's probably going to do CAD at some point. Doesn't matter if you're the principal, the lowest man on the totem pole, you're going to do it. And it's a really good skill to know. And the most important thing would be, my guess, is to show that you know what an XREF is. Everybody know what that is at this point? Maybe, hopefully. XREFs, make sure that is like the most common question in interviews. Like, do you know what an XREF is? If you don't know what it is, come up, ask me. We can kind of go through it before we leave today. And line weights. So know how to use a pen style or plot style, which basically, so all this is drafted in color, right? Have you all worked on this so far yet? Kind of, sort of, some might not. This is all drafted in color, and then I press plot on my computer, and it plots out all those different colors and different hatches as exactly what I have programmed in my computer to export in black and white. So I can see that there's really nice layering and like different textures and stuff. It's not showing that wonderful because it's a PDF when it prints. It's like you can see the different layers a little bit better. It's really important to be able to show that. Like, I think those are the two skills that anybody is looking for. It doesn't matter what the firm is, as a general understanding of AutoCAD. Because pretty much everybody can draft a line. P lines are really important. I'm just I'm diving into my AutoCAD class now. It's like P lines are super important, plot styles, and know how to XREF a doc and scale something. Really, beyond that, every firm is probably going to teach you exactly how they do CAD in their office, and you're probably not going to have to worry about it. This is to show some general understanding. Again, I love to rant about all these things. So, any other questions? Yep, there we go. Sorry. Uh-huh. Right. So like we were talking about earlier, like the, it's out of there somewhere. But anyways, something that had the ceramic head on it, I think it's important to include those other things as well, especially if you have something you need to fill some space, or you need to show that you have some experience in certain things. You want to show that you can do these and you have an eye for something. That's the way to do it, is to show that like I have an eye as an artist. I don't care if you're painting, if you're taking a photograph, if you're a ceramicist, if you do metal sculpture, right? If you have some of those kind of fun, or even like building furniture, right? Like all those kind of things show like a certain design sense. Or if you're like a super crafter and you make like cool things, right? It's okay to show those. I really like those. I always tell like anybody that shows up as a freshman to one of these lovely courses, be prepared to probably not be selected your first time around, trying to get an internship after a first year. I would say the best luck that anybody typically has as a freshman is actually trying to go in and act more as an office administrator for a while and just be in the office. I had a student that graduated a year ago. They started their freshman year at an office. Basically, they were answering phones, they were fielding emails, and they were kind of helping out in the office. They had to fill in stuff once in a while. Like, and now she graduated and they offered her a full-time job when she graduated, right? So she moved all the way up in that firm all the way through. So like, there's different ways to start. Oftentimes it's a phone call, because pretty much every firm probably needs somebody at some point to like just help with the random stuff around the office. Like our big one right now is like, I send out one of our interns probably at least once a day, if not twice a day, to go search for materials, because materials in COVID have become my nightmare. It used to be like 10% of my job. Now it's like 50% of my job is like trying to source things. So like everybody's kind of always looking for something like that, especially if it doesn't cost them as much as paying one of their salaried employees to go out and do it. It's a great spot to try to fill in, but often it's a phone call. Just say like, hey, I'm in the landscape architecture program. I'd love to come in and maybe I can just shadow for a day. And then oftentimes that's when you would broach the subject, maybe when you're there. Shadowing is always a really good way to get a foot in the door somewhere if you're trying to get a job, or even just opening up a dialogue, and they might be able to help you to find a job in another firm, right? I think that's always like my biggest piece of advice is find those mentors in the field and asking for shadow days. Like if I can just come in, I love the work you do. Like, can I just come in and see what y'all do for a day? Like, I think we've had 3 in the last probably 3 months that have come and done that in our office. And it's like, oftentimes like you can come in for like 3 hours in the morning. It's like, I might take you to a meeting with me like in the morning, and when I come back, might do some design stuff, might meet the team a little bit before lunch, and I say, all right, we're gonna send you off for the day. It was great to meet you. Keep in touch. Like, cause I love shadow days. I think they're fun. Because it's different for everybody in our office. Sometimes I'll pass them off to somebody else in the office, and it's kind of fun for them. It just adds a little bit of flavor, even though we're busy. Like staying stagnant is like, it's like the kiss of death, is not changing and moving. So like a lot of firms are trying to find that little bit of difference in the average day if they can fit it in their schedule. So don't be afraid. The shadow day is my piece of advice then. Any other questions? Are there questions online? Oh, I got chats. Okay. Okay. I'm game to like hang out. I'm like down here for the night. So like my next portion was going to be, we could take a quick break, like 10 minutes. And then if anybody has any portfolio stuff, what I really want to do with like our second portion, I know some of you probably want to go home and go to sleep because it's life and school and you have homework. But what I'd love to do, if anybody wants to like stay and hang out, is I have my iPad here with me. What I'll do is if we can get your portfolio either loaded up on the computer here, or you can share it in Zoom through your computer, and I can mark it up and we can kind of look up on the screen. I know it sounds really daunting, but this is probably like my favorite part, and often ends up being everybody's favorite part of this whole portion of like how we're talking about portfolios. Because I'm not afraid to like go up here and be like, okay, I'm gonna open InDesign for 5 minutes and I'm gonna show you like how we might do this. Let's lay out the front page. And it's like nobody's stuff is ever gonna be wrong. I might tell you like, oh, this is terrible, let's throw it away. But it's like, I'm gonna be joking about it mostly, unless it's really bad. I'm just kidding. So it's really all about like, let's just put it out there. It's get somebody's eyes on it. Because if you don't know what you're doing yet, you don't know what you're doing yet. And like, this is a chance to learn and learn together, and that's okay. Like, I think it's better to learn together than one-on-one often, because we can learn a bunch of things all at once versus every single person taking a bunch of time, right? Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if there's no more questions, then that wraps up the presentation. If you have a portfolio that you want to look at, please stick around. If not, then please grab some snack and roll it out.
Of course. Thank you, guys. And I'm always accessible. If anybody wants to just go home after this, you can always shoot me an email with your portfolio. It normally takes me about a week to just kind of find some time to sit down and look at it. But I will pretty much always send somebody back red lines. It's like one of my favorite things is always like, I always have to have red pens around because